Let me start by saying something that might get me cancelled in polite gaming circles. I love toxic MMORPGs, I love it and I enjoy it. And I think you might too, you just won't admit it. So before you give me a thumbs down and switch it to a different video, hear me out. Because I'm not talking about the kind of toxic where someone gets stalked, doxxed, or genuinely harassed to the point of quitting. That's not what this video is about. What I'm talking about is that specific, chaotic, beautiful kind of toxicity that only exists in a massively multiplayer online game where the stakes feel enormous but the consequences are essentially zero. Let me paint you a picture. It's 2 AM, we're in a guild raid. We've been on this boss for 45 minutes. 45 minutes! We have one attempt left before the server resets. Everyone is stressed, everyone is tired. And then, our tank, a guy who goes by the name Dark Lord 929, an already suspicious name, he pulls the boss in the wrong direction, wipes the entire raid, and then types in the chat, "My bad, LOL." I watch our guild leader, a 35-year-old nurse from Hamburg named Dave, completely lose his mind in voice chat. And I quote, "That's it, I'm done. I've been raiding with you people for over a year and you pull toward a wall?" And you know what? That moment, that absolute disaster of a moment, is one of my favorite gaming memories of all time. See, here's the thing about toxic MMOs that nobody wants to say out loud. The toxicity is part of the game, not the harassment, not the slurs, not the deliberate cruelty. I want to be clear about that. But the trash talk, the banter, the moment someone calls you a bronze-brained peasant because you walked into a fire trap for the third time, that's entertainment. That is alive, unscripted, human theater, and it is magnificent. And the reason it works, the reason it only works is this specific environment, is because of the screen. Think about what happens when you sit down and log into a game like Throne and Liberty or Black Desert Online or Where Winds Meet or old school RuneScape. You are no longer Dave from accounting. You are no longer the person who apologizes too much in meetings or lets someone cut in line because the confrontation feels too awkward. You're Shadowblade Undying. You're Magnus Vale the Arcane. You are whoever you want to be. And in that moment, nobody can see your face. There is a psychological concept called disinhibition. The idea that people behave differently when they feel anonymous or removed from the social consequences of their actions. Being online, behind a character name or a fantasy avatar, people just let go. They say things they'd never say in real life. They argue with a ferocity that will be alarming at a dinner table. They defend their guild's honor like it's a matter of national security. And in that space, that weird anonymous consequence-free space, you see something actually kind of fascinating. You see people being completely unapologetically themselves. Not the polished LinkedIn version, not the carefully managed social media version, the raw version, the version that gets frustrated, talks trash, celebrates too loudly, and blames the healer for literally everything that goes wrong. And I've met more real people in toxic MMOs than I have in years of polite, surface-level, real-world interactions. I remember this one time in Throne and Liberty, I was in a PvP match and I got absolutely destroyed by this player. Like, it wasn't even close. They killed me so fast that I had to go and double check if I was actually playing the game. And then someone typed in all caps, "Go back to PvE, you tourist." And I sat back in my chair and I laughed because honestly, they were right. I was a PvE tourist. I had no business being in that match. And there was something strangely refreshing about someone just saying the thing. No softening, no hey, respectfully, just pure unfiltered honesty delivered at 11 PM by a stranger named CriticalKittenz. And I actually went back, learned PvP properly, got better, and eventually I became the person typing "go back to PvE" to someone else. And I'm not proud of it, but I'm also a little bit proud of it. There's also something to be said about the low-stakes environment. It makes the toxicity feel almost theatrical. In real life, if someone insults your decision-making at work, that has consequences. Your boss hears about it, it goes in a file, there is a whole HR process, and it lingers. In an MMORPG, someone calls you a potato sack DPS, and 5 minutes later, you're both fighting the same world boss together. You're cooperating, you're defending each other. The insult has completely evaporated into the digital atmosphere because the game demanded you move on. There's something kind of beautiful about that, a forced conflict and resolution cycle that real life rarely gives you. I actually believe, and this is my slightly unhinged theory, that certain MMOs are better at teaching conflict resolution than some workplaces, because the conflict means nothing and the resolution is immediate. For instance, you can hold a grudge in a dungeon. The dungeon won't let you. Now let me tell you a guy I used to play with. I'll call him Vortex because that was his actual in-game name, and it was quite intimidating before you met him. Vortex was the most consistently rude person in our guild. If you made a mistake, Vortex knew about it. If you had bad gear, Vortex would announce it to the group. He once spent 10 minutes explaining to a new player exactly why their build was an insult to the class. And look, that's not great behavior. I'm not holding him up as a role model, but here's the twist. Vortex was also the guy at 3 AM when the servers were quiet who would spend an hour helping a new player understand the new game systems. Not because he was asked, just because he cared about the game. He was toxic and deeply passionate, and in the weird ecosystem of an MMORPG, those two things lived side by side. I've met a version of Vortex in every game I've ever played, and I think what the toxicity often masks is just investment. People who don't care about the game don't get angry about it. The rage is, in its own chaotic way, a form of love. Now I want to address the elephant in the room, or I guess in this case, the orc in the dungeon. Is some of it too much? Yes, absolutely. There's a line between competitive banter and genuine cruelty. There's a difference between "you're the worst healer I've ever seen in the heat of a failed raid" and deliberately targeting someone, making it personal, making it about who they are rather than how they play. The first one stings and then disappears. The second one follows people home. Good toxicity, if I can use that phrase without sounding completely unhinged, is impersonal. It's about the play, the build, the decision. It's about Shadowblade the Undying making a terrible call. It's not about the person behind the keyboard. And most players, even the rowdy ones, understand that distinction instinctively. There's an unspoken mutual understanding. We're just playing characters right now. This is the game talking. Tomorrow, we're strangers again. And here's where it all lands for me, because I think there's something genuinely meaningful underneath all of this. Toxic MMORPGs at their best are one of the last places where humans interact with almost zero social filter. And in that chaos, in that messy, argument-filled, wipe-recovering, trash-talking environment, something actually kind of wonderful can happen. You build resilience, you learn to take criticism, even bad criticism, and filter out what's useful. You learn to laugh at yourself when you walk into the same fire trap 4 times. You learn that conflict doesn't have to be permanent because the dungeons resets and everyone queues up again. Some of the most loyal, ride-or-die friendships I experienced came from people I met while we were both losing our minds over a failed raid mechanic. Because when you've been through the trenches with someone, even fake digital fantasy trenches, you know how they handle pressure, you know how they actually are, and maybe most importantly, you find a place where you can just be unpolished, where you can mess up, where you can be called out, and then you shrug it off and still move forward. No performance review, no reputation management, just a bunch of people who care way too much about a video game, choosing to spend their free time together fighting imaginary monsters and occasionally each other. So yes, I love toxic MMORPGs. And if you've ever slammed your keyboard because your party wiped, or typed something in all caps that you immediately regretted, or spent 20 minutes explaining to a stranger why their build is objectively wrong, you love them too. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. I read every single one and I make it to a point to respond to as many as I can. I'll be seeing you on the next one. Time to touch some grass.